Hi, and welcome back to the Save It for Parts channel. In this video, I'm looking at some interesting little satellite gadgets, the Spot satellite messengers. Now, as the name suggests, the Save It for Parts channel is all about old, used, cheap, and preferably free technology. I am absolutely not an early adopter of technology, and the Spot satellite messengers are no different. These things have been around since about 2012, and I have three of the earliest models here. So I believe this is the first one, the 2012 Spot satellite messenger. This one is the Model 2, and this little square one is the Model 3. Now the company is up to about the Model 4, and then they also have something that looks like a BlackBerry, which is more of a two-way messenger. These guys are all one-way satellite transmitters. You can't get messages back down from space with these, but you can transmit messages up to space. And these use a satellite phone system called Globalstar. It's similar to the Iridium satellite network. It uses the L-band for transmissions up from user devices like this. The orbits are a little bit different than Iridium. Iridium satellites are in a polar orbit. Globalstar is in an inclined low Earth orbit, so similar altitude, but the inclination means that Globalstar doesn't cover quite the same areas, especially polar areas. Now, this Globalstar outfit doesn't just do the Spot messengers. They also have a more traditional satellite phone or a satellite-based Wi-Fi access point like this thing. Somebody sent me this recently. I've not had a chance to try it. I suspect it's going to be very expensive, much like the Inmarsat system that I tested before, but we might try this in a different video. These are a cool little gadget that can help you keep in touch with family and friends. It can help you send emergency messages or tracking data when you're out hunting, camping, backpacking, boating, whatever. They're a pretty cool idea, although they are a little bit outdated these days. Apple recently announced that their iPhones are going to use the Globalstar network for emergency messages and possibly for check-in and tracking messages, so iPhones are going to start doing the same thing as these little guys. Samsung and some other phone providers are also working on that. These are pretty low power little transmitters. They just use a frequency just above GPS, and you can integrate that into a cell phone or another gadget pretty easily. So these are becoming obsolete. The pricing on these things is also becoming obsolete. When you can have an all-in-one cell phone plan that includes something like emergency satellite communications, it doesn't really make sense to pay the fees for these things. There is a subscription fee, a monthly fee, there's an activation fee, so these things are kind of expensive. They were cool for a while, but I looked into them off and on over the years, and I always thought, well, they're a little bit too expensive for what they do. They're also not quite as good as other emergency communication systems. These will only bring you help in an SOS situation, supposedly if you have an account. If you're not paid up, well, I guess you're out of luck. If you have something like a personal locator beacon, an EPIRB, a 406 megahertz emergency locator transmitter, those you buy once, you stick them in your boat, you stick them in your aircraft, you carry them around with you, and those will work as long as the battery is good in any situation, whether or not you have an account. And those go through many, many more satellites. GPS satellites have 406 megahertz emergency receivers on them. Geostationary weather satellites have that. A lot of different satellites will pick up a 406 megahertz beacon, where these little things can only be picked up by the Globalstar network. Now, the plus sides of these are they were cheap and they're small. A professional emergency locator beacon can be 4 or 5 times this size and weight and can cost 3 or 4 times as much. So it's kind of a trade-off if you want something like that, or if you want something like this that you can put in your pocket. And the company claims that between 2012 and 2019, these were involved in 6,000 rescues or so. So supposedly they did help some people, and they continue to help people for the folks that are subscribed to this service. So this will send your location to a web map, so your friends and family can log into that map. They can see where you are or where your beacon is. You don't necessarily need to have this on yourself. You could strap it to a boat that you're tracking. You could strap it to a balloon. You could have it on some kind of device out in the field if you're using it for experiments. We have an OK button that will send a predefined 41-character message to a predefined group of your contacts. So you could have a message in there that says, I'm okay, I've made camp for the night, and you push that button every night when you make camp, when you're on an extended trip. We have another custom message button, and that basically gives you a second option. So you can have your OK message, and you can have this other message like, I'm delayed, or something else has happened, but don't worry about me. Then, under these covers, we have the emergency messages. So we have the little handshake button. That is a help message, and that again goes out to your predefined contacts, not to emergency services, not to the Coast Guard, not to search and rescue. If it's more of an emergency than just your friends and family can handle, then there is an SOS button, and that does go to search and rescue, Coast Guard, etc. You kind of have to work it out beforehand with your friends and family. What do those 5 messages mean? Or I guess the 4 messages, because the SOS button is going to bring emergency services. So again, somewhat limited. It has some applications, but there are definitely other products. Spot here, Globalstar, does have that 2-way messenger where you can actually send like SMS messages, so you can let people know how far you made it each day, what happened on your trip, if you had any specific troubles, and you don't have to rely on just 4 predefined messages. I picked these up very cheaply secondhand from a group that had already shifted to other technologies. I'll open some of these up and just see what's inside, but if we actually get an account activated and use one, I think we'll stick with the newest one I have. For the Teardown, let's start with the original Spot satellite messenger. This is the big chunky one. And this only had 3 options. We had 911 emergency, OK, or help. Companies had not yet discovered the joys of triple reverse hex security screws in 2012, and they were still using real Phillips screws, so you can actually take them apart. And we have regular old AA batteries, although these are the fancier lithium style. Now this one claims it's powered by Axon, A-X-O-N-N. I looked that up and all I could find were Lego Bionicle toys, so Axon must have been some fly-by-night company from the 2000s that's not around anymore. So here's what's inside our Gen 1 Spot. We definitely have some RF equipment with this shielding over it, and there's a little bit of corrosion visible in here. This is a used unit. It's got all this waterproofing, but it kind of seems like maybe it's gotten some moisture in there in the past, so I'm not sure if this one actually works or not. So this is the entire board and antenna for the Spot Gen 1. Again, it is powered by Axon. We have a big old ceramic patch antenna, so typical looking L-band antenna. It probably does both GPS and their transmission up to the Globalstar system. Now this Gen 1 does power on. You can see the green light is flashing there. I was a little curious to try it out, but Spot does not support the Gen 1 anymore, nor do they support the Gen 2. The oldest one that you can actually get a service account for on their website is a Gen 3. So I don't know if that's due to technology changes with these or just good old corporate greed and planned obsolescence. But that does mean that this is basically just a museum piece or spare parts for me. I can't actually use it for anything. If anyone out there has a suggestion for how to reuse this, maybe there's a way to hack it, maybe I can desolder that patch antenna, use it for something else, that could be interesting. So moving on to the Gen 2, or technically this is a model PT2. This one is still powered by Axon, so apparently they were still around. A little bit different form factor, slightly different design. Now they did have a couple upgrades with this. You can see the emergency buttons, the 911 button over here, and the Ask Your Friends for Help button are covered by little covers, and that's probably because the buttons on the original one were too easy to bump in your pocket or your backpack. In this one, the other buttons are easy to access, but those emergency ones have kind of safety clips over them. And we do have more options on this. We have power, SOS, Ask Your Friends for Help, and then we have the OK, custom message, and tracking buttons, the same as the Gen 3. And they'd also discovered the joys of eliminating all possible screws. So I don't know how you open this up. You're obviously not supposed to as a consumer, but I'm not actually sure how this is put together. If it's just kind of snap fit along the edges like a cell phone and you can pry it open with a screwdriver. I looked under the batteries, there's no screws under there either. I don't expect this to look much different underneath than the Gen 1. There's going to be a ceramic patch antenna, there's going to be some RF stuff, it's going to be a single board, so it's not going to be that exciting to open it up anyway. We're just going to set this one aside as well. So that brings us to the Spot Gen 3, which also has a number of upgrades. We have a recessed power button on the side, we have these little rubber covers for the emergency buttons. I think a model number here embossed onto the plastic, but it is so tiny I can't actually read that, so I can't tell you what the actual model number is. And it does turn on, and it is much more exciting about it than the other ones. Now, I actually have a trip coming up, and it might be fun to test this out. It's not a crazy off-grid wilderness trip. We're actually just going to be taking a train across the US, but that's kind of cool. The train goes through some areas that don't have cell phone coverage and don't have Wi-Fi, so a little tracker like this Could be fun to just follow our journey and see where we're at. And I'm just going to try to get the cheapest account they have, which is still probably going to be like $50 for a month. They have a bunch of gimmicks where if you pay for a whole year, it's cheaper per month. You can reactivate during the year, but for the casual user, it's always kind of a ripoff because you end up paying a ton for short-term use. The company makes a fortune, and again, that's kind of why these are going by the wayside and everybody's going to just be using cell phones in the future. Now, I should mention this is not a sponsored video. I bought these things secondhand, and I tried contacting Spot and Globalstar to ask if they would give me a free month of service in return for me talking about their little gadget, but as usual, when I email a big faceless corporation, there was no response. They don't check their email. They don't answer their email. I was lucky to even be able to find an email address. So big corporations absolutely don't care if you buy their product or not. They're not even really supporting this particular product anymore. They'd like you to buy their new one. I'm lucky it still works at all. I'm lucky they haven't completely discontinued it. And here's the part where they screw around with the pricing like a cell phone company. So it's $14.95 a month plus $30 activation fee and a $35 flex charge. So for 1 month of service, it's actually $80. So the actual hardware here only cost me $75, and that was for all three of these. Even though the two old ones don't work, I still paid less for this unit than for their stupid service plan. And I'm really hesitant to pay $80 for a 1 month service, but I paid something similar to that for the Inmarsat video, and hey, this is where my Patreon subscribers really help out. So if you want to support me paying for outdated, overpriced satellite services, jump over to Patreon and throw me $5 a month, and it really helps out when I make poor financial decisions like this. And they also have this auto-renew thing that you're supposed to contact them to cancel. A lot of countries are making this illegal, where it has to be as easy to opt out to cancel as it was to sign up. So I don't like this. This is one of those things that makes me not want to use Spot or Globalstar, but we're going to try it anyway, and I just have to put on my calendar to make sure to cancel. All right, so we're logged into the Spot desktop. We have our device up here, and we have various settings. So I can change my device name. I can go and change the tracking interval, so I can ping the satellite every 5, 10, 30, or 60 minutes. That's kind of cool. We've got SOS test mode if we want to test out that button. We have movement alerts. That's kind of neat. So we can basically activate a alert, I think either to us or to our contacts if the device is stationary and then starts moving. And then we've got this dock mode for monitoring a vehicle. So this is kind of cool. If you have the Spot plugged in on your boat, and you want to know if your boat has vanished or disappeared from the dock, you can enable this. This might be useful for tracking a car if you think your car is going to get stolen and you don't have that newfangled OnStar thing. So just out of curiosity, I wanted to see what one of these signals actually looks like on the radio spectrum. So I have hooked up the HackRF that Newelec sent me. We've got the laptop running SDR++. We're at 1.611 gigahertz. Maybe we actually have to push the track button before it'll get a GPS lock and track. I don't know. I didn't get a manual of this. I should go look one up online. Hold that down longer. Okay, that's flashing. That's flashing. Oh, now we have the GPS light flashing. Hey, and there you go. We just showed up. So all I had to do was read the instructions and figure out, yes, I have to actually hold down that tracking button to make it start tracking. Okay, yeah, there was something. That was right when I turned it on. We had quite a strong burst across this frequency that I'm looking at. So I think that was probably an initial startup message. Okay, we have a green GPS light on the Gen 2. I'm going to try to send that OK message from it. Now, I was not able to get the OK light to come on, but I was able to hold down the custom message button, and it looks like we transmitted something. And that message sent light is blinking, so we know that the message was transmitted. Again, this is the Gen 2 that they don't support, and I don't have an account for this one, so that message just went off into the ether and isn't getting routed anywhere. So I just kind of wanted to see what it looked like on the SDR. Okay, we've been able to give the Spot a more real-world test. I just got back from a slightly longer trip halfway across the US, flew over to Oregon, we drove out to the coast, we drove down to Northern California, drove back to Portland, and then we took a train halfway across the northern US, all the way back to Minneapolis, St. Paul. So I left the spot tracker on for quite a bit of that trip, including inside an aluminum-bodied railroad car where it seemed to work just fine. I just had it up against the window in the train car, and it seemed like it was able to send messages to the satellites. It did seem to work pretty well, even in deep canyons in the Rocky Mountains, although we did have some gaps in coverage where we went through tunnels and whatnot. And I noticed a few things about this. It does have a little bit of position inaccuracy, so when we were stopped at stations, if we were stopped for more than 10 minutes and we got multiple pings from the spot messenger, that GPS location did bounce around a little bit within about 50 to 100 feet, and it tended to be 50 to 100 feet off of where we were actually located. So if you're trying to find someone with this, you might have to send the search party out within a little bit more of a radius. It's not super exact, down to the inch like modern cell phone GPS might be. The batteries did end up lasting for essentially a week of use. Now, I didn't have it tracking constantly all week, but we did leave the tracker on and running for something like 48 hours on the train, so that worked just fine. It was working unattended, again, just propped up in the train window. So how about the messaging features? I sent a couple test messages, and those seem like they came through. Now, when I set this up, I didn't quite realize all the options on the website. There are a million options on here, and they're not always quite clear right away. I have to read through more of the instructions. I have to figure out a little bit more of what some of these settings are. And you can set up your own phone, you can set up somebody else's phone, you can do email and or text. So that's kind of separate from the emergency SOS contacts. All right, so first up we've got our check-in button. Just hold that down, and then we should see it come through on our text messages here as well as email. All right, that light is lit. That means our message has been transmitted up to the satellite, and here it is. It just came through, so there's almost no delay between transmitting and receiving. There is a little bit of a delay between pushing this button and having it go up to the satellite. It takes about 30 to 60 seconds, it seems like. And it also came through on email at exactly the same time. So let's try to send the custom message, so I'll hold that one down. All right, and there it is. It popped up almost faster than I could run inside the house to check on it. So there is our custom message. So overall, the little Spot satellite messenger is kind of a cool device, although again, it's one that's kind of going by the wayside as capabilities like this get added to iPhones, Android phones, other consumer devices that you already have on you. So these things are a little overpriced for what they are, especially nowadays when there's so many competitors popping up. I am probably not going to use this a whole lot more this year because it is pretty expensive. It's not really worth it. It was a gimmick, it was a novelty to use it on the train, but it didn't really add anything. There are already train tracker websites. I can update people on my phone. The train has Wi-Fi. Next year I might be going on a little bit bigger trip, so maybe we'll reactivate it if the service is still around, and especially if it becomes more affordable. Now, the mapping interface is reasonably good. You can get it on your phone, you can get it on a computer, and you can share this map with your friends and family. So if you want to do the live tracking thing every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, you can have your friends and family log onto the website with a shared password and just keep track of that. They can look at the live view, they can look at the past week of history, the past 24 hours of history. On the shared view, it doesn't seem to go back more than a week. It just kind of deletes those old points. So yeah, that's about all I've got for this video. The old spots, which I can't get activated on their website, are just going to go in a junk drawer somewhere. Maybe we'll find a use for these in the future. I hope this has been an interesting little video for everyone. If you want to see more weird, obscure, or obsolete satellite gadgets, I do have other videos on things like this, and I have videos about weather satellites, military satellites, all kinds of space-based things that I find pretty fun to play around with. If you want to see more stuff like that in the future, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks to everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.